Hello guys, we are going to be talking about composition and thinking about it in terms of its relation to the element of art, which is space. So, as you've probably heard me say before, there are 7 elements of art, which are in the column on the left, and 7 principles of design. We are going to be looking at, like I said, space. Now, space does incorporate several different ways of thinking about space and art, but we are actually going to be focusing on just our 2D space and the composition of that space for now. We're going to be looking at 7 different composition styles. Number 1 is the S shape. Now, I decided to use this one first because it's pretty obvious whenever you see it. There's this S or backwards S, usually by some sort of river or pathway that's carved out through the picture, and that S line brings your eye, the viewer's eye, all the way through the image. So here's an example with river. You can see it going back into the distance, pulls you from the bottom up towards about 2/3 up the way up the page. Another one with a river. This one uses a pathway. Now, I wanted to include these because they're not quite as obvious as some of the others, and they still both use water as their medium for that S, but it's a little bit of a wider S, but still an S composition. This one I really liked because it was neither the pathway or the water, which you typically see, but kind of a valley that creates this big S visually. Number 2 is the triangle composition. So this can be formed either by 3 main objects that kind of complete the 3 different points of a triangle, or just something, whenever you look at it as a whole, makes that shape of a triangle with those 3 different points when you combine them all and kind of let everything blur together. Most of the time, if you've got a painting or a picture that's just a portrait, you're going to find that it is the triangle composition because of just the way our bodies are shaped. We've got a smaller head than we do shoulders, so that's always going to create that kind of 3-point effect. We get a little bit wider, especially when we're sitting towards the bottom. The triangle composition is very sturdy. And not only can it be used with just your portraits of one person, but when you've got multiple people, again, that the head here serves as like the top point of the triangle, and then it gets pulled down to our little baby friends. Same thing with these 2 ladies. They're sitting, so their legs bring out the wider point of the triangle, and their heads make up the top point. Here's an abstract version just to give you an example of how this would be used abstractly, although it's pretty clear that this is a triangular composition. This digital artwork is also a really good example of triangular composition because you've got your main focus of this guy here, and then the darker elements that are really more of the main focus create the triangle shape. This one is triangular with the leaves and the people, but it's also triangular in different repeating ways with the bodies of the people. So you've got your big triangle, but you'll see that the triangle shape repeats over and over with the groups of people and individuals. Their arms create the leading lines as well, and there are more in here. Those are just ones I pointed out. So think about if you see a repeating shape, a lot of times that is the composition style that's most prevalent. That does lead me to the point that some artworks aren't just one. Sometimes you can find 1 or 2 or 3 different composition styles, but usually there's one that stands out more than the others. Usually. Number 3 is the L shape or cross composition. So literally think of a cross, like you've got these lines of the sailboat crossing with the horizon line, or the lines of the tree, again with the horizon lines and buildings here. Again, another pretty sturdy composition, stable. You'll see it if you've got someone sitting down and you see their whole body. But again, this could be arguably a triangular composition. But I think because of the way that he has this profile view, we see that L shape almost of his body, and this really thick dark line of the wall that creates more of a cross or L composition. This one, we have the trees as well as the lamp posts that create that L composition or cross in multiple different areas, and those aren't even all of them. Again, just a few to point them out. This one by Salvador Dali, pretty famous artwork, and I think arguably maybe some other types of composition going on as well. But we have a pretty strong cross here with this little tree and its limb almost in line with the horizon line and this kind of cliff bank over here. Number 4 is circular composition. Again, once you see this one, it's pretty hard to unsee, but usually it's pretty obvious. You've got something that makes up that O or circle, kind of like the edge of this bank of water here makes a literal circle. It can also be used with people or objects that kind of float circularly around. So look at implied lines whenever considering a composition. You've got this table creating the main circular composition and some repeating circles on the tablecloth, the shapes of the fruits, and so on. This one of the tree, the branch, and leaves create again that implied line of circle. This one I think is not as obvious, and I could see an argument for some other composition styles, maybe even also triangular. This one I think is pretty clearly circular. We've got not only the space of the trees creating that circle, but we've got the bow curving along the outer edge of that circle. This one kind of repeating or mimicking that circle shape. Even the edge of this guy's arm and the tilt of his head completing that circular form. This one I do agree is circular, although she is sitting kind of at that L or T shape composition. But again, we've got implied lines of the body, this kind of curvature of her back, neck, and head, leading into the head, neck, and back of the baby, all the way around, and then the center circular shape of this girl's face as it goes out. Number 5 is radiating lines. This is a pretty good example of where you use the implied lines again, the line of the gun here, the arms, even her arm, and the flag. Usually lines that radiate from a certain or to a certain point. Think like a starburst. So like in this little example on the left, we've got the clouds radiating away from the group of trees, and even the lines of perhaps a stream here, all leading out again like that starburst. So speaking of starburst, here's a pretty obvious example of radiating lines, again a more abstract work of art, but just to really drive the point home of what radiating lines are. This one is not quite as obvious, but once you see it, it makes sense. You've got these wavy lines of the different colors of grass and pathways leading towards the center, the stairway lines leading towards the center, and a lot of movement, mostly pointing your eyes in that direction, so they're radiating from the center there. This one's a good example as well. You've got the limbs of a tree and also the direction of the strokes of the paint leading in certain directions. Even the grass, the direction of the strokes lead away from that center area, and it kind of explodes outward in your radiating lines. I like these examples as well because they imply the lines more than some of the other radiating examples do. Again, we've got little pathways or even shadows and clouds and lines of tree lines there leading towards this barn. The orientation of these hay bales are in almost perfect lines. They vary a little bit, but all of them lead back towards this point. The angle of the light and shading on these mountains right here, and that darker point of those two trees, I'm guessing, are the focal point there. Same thing here. Rocks leading in that direction, cliff leading in that direction, bushes, grass, bushes, lines radiating toward or away from a focal point. Just some more examples of radiating lines, or radiating lines from implied lines. So these include the limbs of people, which are used a lot to help imply a composition. Also, a radiating line can be not just a circular one, but imagine the very center of that radiating point is pulled off to the side, like in this one. Again, they use the different directional lines of the bodies to help imply that radiating composition. Number 6 is grouping. So this is all about balance in artwork. So whenever you have two big groups of something, you want to make sure they're visually balanced. So what visually balanced means is that it doesn't have to literally be the same size, but you may use other elements of art or principles of design to make them visually balanced, like on a scale. So look at this scale here for a moment. We've got this bigger cube balanced with a very much smaller cube, much more smaller cube. But it looks visually balanced because of the bright color of this one. So even though this one's bigger and takes up more space visually, this one has a lot more emphasis because of its color. So it really should be smaller. But if it were gray, the same color on both sides, it would not be balanced, because that one, other things equal, that one is bigger. So let's take a look at this famous artwork. We've got a grouping of these ballerinas and a grouping of these really dark bushes. So we have not just size, well, we have a size difference that we're going to have to contend with, or the artist has to contend with, and the way he balances them is by making these very light, making light to make it brighter skin on these ballerinas, and darkness to make this visually heavy. So darker stuff, again, is that visually heaviness, and it helps to balance out this grouping of much bigger in actual space figurines. We've got grouping here. So again, we've got a lot more people, a lot more space than just the one guy. But the one on the left is a little bit lighter in color than the majority of these people. The ones in the background holding up this guy here are almost kind of blend in with the fabric because they're so dark. You don't automatically see them. So using color and light again to help balance these. This one especially uses color to help balance the two groupings of trees and their reflections. And we have the use of warm colors versus cool colors to help balance them. So cool colors are usually going to be your darker colors anyway, and like I said before, darker colors are, or just darkness in general, is heavier than lighter colors. So they have a little bit more of your warm colors here, your yellows and oranges and a little bit of greens, and then a little bit smaller section of your cool colors. so that everything appears visually balanced without being exactly the same size. Number 7, and our last form of composition that we're going to talk about, even though there are more, I think these are the most important ones to know. And diagonal one especially is pretty useful because it can make a lot of movement within your artwork. So again, these are going to be implied lines most of the time. In this image here, we've got the bank of the river as a diagonal that leads the viewer's eye through the page and makes it a little bit less stagnant. Like, we've got a lot of people just sitting and standing, but it helps create this sense of movement and pull throughout the image. So look at what directions are those lines leading you, the horizon lines, something silhouetted, the main lines that pop out to you. And you can tell if that's going to be a diagonal composition or if the artist is using a diagonal line to make something more dynamic. This one's a really great example because this mast, right? I don't know. I'm not a sailor. The mast here has a really strong diagonal line that pulls you throughout the image as a viewer and creates this sense of movement with the water. We almost feel like we're on this boat with them, and we feel the crash of the wave as the boat's rocking. If you've ever been on a boat before, you kind of relate to that feeling, although hopefully you've never sunk a boat, which looks like is what about to happen. So again, another diagonal, this one using people, just the positioning of these ballerinas throughout the page. You can see they get higher and create that line. This one uses multiple diagonal lines and creates a lot of movement and action going on within this image. We've got the arms and wing and leg creating that strong diagonal that way. And then I would say especially this wing and angle of the head creating the diagonal in the opposing direction. So that helps again to create that movement. Another one kind of implying the lines. The body of Jesus is at an angle, and all of the tilt of these heads and direction of this wing creates the opposing diagonal lines. Now we're going to take a look at some different album covers. So these are music album covers. This one is pretty clear, especially since we just talked about the diagonal composition, and it has a literal diagonal line going through, but that line gets disrupted around this sphere, and we have very geometric parallel lines, and they become organic as we get lower down the page here, and they are obstructed by this ball. Pretty interesting visually. I like this design. We've also got this album cover, and I would say that this is going to be the T or cross composition. But this one I really like as well. From an artist's point of view, it's done very nicely. Another interesting album design cover here. What do you think this one is? I could see arguments for either groupings or a circular composition with repeating circles throughout the image. And everyone's easiest one, our S composition. So let's talk about, one more. This one's really cool. And I say, automatically I see this very sturdy triangle composition. Now let's talk about your project. So the very first thing you'll need to do is come to me and get 2 dice, or raise your hand and I'll come to you. And I want you to roll the dice until you get a number between 1 and 7. So if on your first roll you get a 4 on one and a 1 on the other, you've rolled a 5, you stop. That's the number you get, number 5. Then I want you to pick an album from a musician that you like. so any album, any musician, totally up to you, and redesign that album cover using the composition style of the number you rolled. So in that example I said if you rolled a 5, you'll be designing a cover with a radiating lines composition. So whatever number you rolled between 1 and 7, you have to use that composition style for your redesign of the album cover. There are some requirements. Follow the rules of the composition style you rolled. Make sure you're following those rules so that you're actually practicing the skills of creating those compositions. Use either the drawing pad or mouse to include at least one digitally illustrated element in your design. So you need to draw something digitally in your design. Doesn't have to be a big part of it, or it can be the whole thing. Just depends what you want to do with your design, but at least one element. I want you to use at least a filter on at least one of your layers, so be thinking multiple layers to this project. And I want you to use an effects on at least one of your layers. Now, you may want to use either one or both of those things for your text. I'm going to include a video in the description below, and I want you to watch that video. It's only 6 minutes, but it gives a handful of different things you can do with text just to kind of get your ideas going on some different things you might want to play around with, because your text needs to be, or it doesn't need to be, but it can be a part of that compositional style that you're using. So how can you make that text, the album cover, work for you? Or I'm sorry, album title is what I meant to say. So use either one of those effects or create your own effect for text. And then as usual, use only copyright-free images. I'm really excited to see what type of projects you guys are going to come up with. Let me know if you have any questions, and begin.